Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to implement MongoDB Atlas Search in your applications, and this is going to open up powerful search capabilities in the kind of apps you're able to build on AppSmith. Don't worry, Atlas Search is very easy to set up. In fact, you would not have to worry about creating traditional text search index in order to use the search functionality in MongoDB. All of this is handled by Atlas, so you don't have to worry about it. My name is Confident, and I'm a developer advocate at AppSmith. Without any delay, let's get started. Alright, so this is the application we are going to be building in today's tutorial. It is a movie rental store dashboard where customers would come to rent movies, and the admin would use this application to track those rentals and manage them. So a customer can walk up to the admin, for example, and say, I want to rent a movie on apples, and the admin would use this dashboard to make that search. So let's search for apples. And we have apples here. He's just going to click on the rent, and we have the movie name automatically pre-filled. Now we can go on to search for that customer's email. So the customer has to be pre-registered, and we can search for that customer's email. So let's say Tina, and we have Tina showing up. So select Tina, for example. The date is also automatically pre-filled, and clicking on save, we can head to the rentals tab and see that that movie has been saved and the rental can be tracked using this application. So this is what we're going to be building largely, and the whole focus of this application would be to integrate MongoDB Atlas Search in your AppSmith applications. So for us to get started, I have a starter application here on the canvas, and it has some basic components. So we have the tab widgets, and we have the rentals tab. We also have the customers tab here pre-built with the queries ready to run them, because taking a look at the data source section, you can see those queries already pre-written and connected. So the first thing we need to do is to connect to the database, and taking a look at what we have in the database, we are using the sample mflix dataset that is available on MongoDB by default. It's a dataset on movies, and we have a couple of collections here. So the collections we're going to be making use of consist of the movies collection that is right here. We also have the rentals collection, and lastly we have the customers collection. So going back to the application, the first thing we want to do here is to connect to the database. And in order to do that, you need to go to data sources, click on the plus button, go to create new, and select MongoDB. So let's select MongoDB, and let's call this data source Atlas. Alright, and now we can go in to use this form to connect to our MongoDB Atlas instance. But instead of filling out this form, I'm just going to set the connection type to the string URI and paste in the MongoDB connection string right here. Alright, and we can test this to see if everything is okay, and you can see that we have a valid connection. So I can go on to save this and then write a query to get movies from the database. The first query we'll be writing will be one to get the top movies from the database. So going back to the database and going to the movies collection right here, each movie has an IMDb rating, and we can get the top movies using the IMDb rating. So let's head back and create a new query. So I'm going to click on create a new query, and let's call this query get top movies. Alright, so for the command, this is going to be an aggregation, and let's set the collection to movies. And for the aggregation pipeline, I'm just going to paste in something I already have configured right here. And taking a look at this, what we are doing here is we are doing a search, and we're only finding movies that fit this match. So movies who have an IMDb rating greater than or equals to 9 would fit this match and will be picked up. And we're setting a limit in the next step of the pipeline, and we're sorting by the highest ranking movies, such that we're going to have the highest ranking movies first, and then the list goes down. And in the projection pipeline, what we're doing here is that we're picking out just the fields we need, because going back to the movie database, you see that we have lots of fields in the movie collection. So we just want to pick out just those we will need to build out the applications, and we have the fields we need right here. So I'm going to click on the run button, and we should get some data coming in from the database, as you can see, and we have some data coming in. The next thing we want to do now is to build a view to display this data. So we need to go back to the canvas and drop in a tab widget. So I'm just going to bring in a tabs widget right here. Expand this. And here we have a nice tab widget. So we're going to have two tabs in the tab widget. We're going to have a tab that displays the top movies. And we also have a tab that displays search results for the search functionality we're going to be building out shortly. So this is going to be search results. And then we have those two tabs showing up. For the top movies tab, I'm just going to bring in a list widget and display the data coming in from the get top movies query. So let's bring in the list widget. I'm going to resize this. All right. And I'm going to connect it to the data coming in from the query. So this is going to be get top movies.data. And we have that data connected to the list widget, as you can see. So let's go into display this data. We have an image widget right here. And for the image widget here, I'm going to use this to display the movie poster. So this is going to be current item.poster. And then we have the movie poster. So I'm just going to resize this. All right, that looks good. Let's also display the movie title. So we have a text widget right here. And I'm going to use this to display the title. So this is going to be current item.title. All right. We also want to display the movie year. So for the text widget right here, this is going to be current item.year. And we also want to display a couple of other things here. So we want to be able to display the rating. So this is going to be current item.imdb.rating. And we have the rating showing up. So I'm just going to make this over 10. All right. We also want to be able to display the genre. So this is going to be current item.genres, which is an array. And we want to pick the first item. And then we have the genre right there. And lastly, I want to drop in a button that would allow to trigger the rental flow. So this is going to be rent. And for the button variant, I'm going to set this to secondary. And we'll have a nice button right here. So I'm just going to resize this and place it at the top. So taking a look at what we have right here, we are able to display the top movies coming from the database. The next thing we want to do is to build a flow that actually allows us to search through the database. And for that, I would need an input widget. So I'm just going to place an input widget right here. And I can extend this a bit. And we'll have the widgets there. For the widget name, I'm going to set this to search input. All right. And let's go into set a placeholder for this. So let's say start typing to search. All right. And we can also specify an icon for this input. So let's use the search icon. And we have the search icon right there. And this looks nice. All right. So the next thing we need to do is to create a flow that actually lets us to search movies from the database. And in order to do this, we need to create an Atlas search index. So to configure this, head over to your Atlas instance and go to the search tab. And what you want to do here is to create a search index. So let's create a search index. There are two ways for you to do this. You can use the visual editor and also the JSON editor. We'll be going with the JSON editor for this index. When we're creating the second search index, I'll show you how to do it using the visual editor. So click on next. And you need to set an index name. So I'm going to leave this as default. If you change the search index name to something else, you would also need to configure that name in the query you'll be sending up in AppSmith. So let's leave this as default. Now let's go on to select the database. So this will be the Mflix database and the movies collection. And now we can go in to configure the JSON for the search index. So the first thing we want to do is to turn off dynamic mappings. When this is turned on, MongoDB Atlas tries to intelligently create an index for every field we have in that collection. But we just want an index for the title field, so we need to turn this off. So I'm going to set this to false. The next thing we want to do is to specify the fields we need to create this index for. So we need to pass in fields. And for the fields, I'm just going to be creating this index for the title field. And for the title field, we need to set an analyzer. So this is going to be analyzer. And for the analyzer, we're going to be using the standard Lucene analyzer. So this is going to be Lucene standard. All right. And lastly, we need to set the data type for this particular field. So this is going to be type. And this is going to be set to string. All right. So we have the JSON configured for this index. I'm just going to click on next, and we can preview everything we have written right here. And I think this looks good. So I'm just going to click on create search index, and this is going to build the index for us. Now we can head back to the application to actually create a query to make use of this search index. So I'm going to go to Atlas right here and create a new query. So let's call this query search movies. All right. So we're going to be using the aggregation command, and we will be searching the movies collection. All right. For the pipeline, I'm just going to paste in something I already configured. So for the search pipeline, we are making use of the Atlas Search we just built on the other tab. All right. And this is where you would come to specify the index if you configured something else. So you need to supply the index and specify the name of the index right here. But since we use the default index, I do not need to do this. So I'm just going to skip that. The next thing we need to supply is the query we want sent up. And for this query, we can pull that from the search input we have on the page. So this is going to be search input.text. All right. And we have the limit pipeline, which is just going to limit the search results to 10. And similarly, we have the projection pipeline that would pick only the fields we need from the movies collection. But running this right now will lead to an error, as you can see, because the query cannot be empty. So all we need to do is to provide a fallback here and pass in an array that just has a star. So that's a simple fallback. And running this should return an empty array because we do not have actual search text. So we can go back to hook that query up to the search input right here. So for the search input, what we want to do is to configure it such that whenever the text changes, we want to go to execute the search movies query. So type in something right here. For example, Apple is going to run the search query and bring the results. But right now, we aren't seeing the results because we don't have that displayed. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to configure the search results tab to display the results, and it's going to look very similar to what we have in the top movies tab. So I'm going to do that real quick and we'll be right back. All right, so we're back, and as I promised earlier, we have the search results tab, which is very similar to what we have in the top movies tab. So taking a look at what we have here, we're actually displaying data coming from the search movies query, and that is what is displayed in the widgets we have showing up. So we can go in to search for something else, say for example, man, and you see that we have the results showing up. But we can even make this experience better such that if there's some search text in the input, we show the search results tab. If there's no search text, we automatically show up the top movies tab. In order to do this, we would need to configure the tab widget. So I'm just going to configure this a bit. So here under the default tab section, what I'm going to do is to write some JavaScript. So what I want to do is to check if there is a search input. If there's a search input, what I want to do is to set the default tab to be the search results tab. All right. If there's no search input, what I'm going to do is to set the tab to the top movies tab. So this is top movies. All right. And we have the top movies right there. And we can even disable showing the tab. So I'm just going to turn this off, and we don't have the tab showing up. So clearing this up is just going to show the top movies tab, and typing in something would show the results tab. So let's go in to make this a lot nicer. So I'm just going to bring this to the bottom right here, bring some text widgets and paste it right here. And for the text widget, I'm going to say search results. Right. and I can expand this a bit and bring this up also. And similarly, we can go in to configure the top movies tab. So I'm just going to bring this down to the bottom here. So let's bring in a text widget, and I'm going to set this to top movies. All right, so set this to heading 1. I'll have the top movies, and let's expand this a bit, take up the entire space. And this looks good. So we can go into search for something. I'll have the search results tab showing up, and we can clear this out and have the top movies tab showing up. Alright, so that looks good. We have configured the search functionality. The next thing I'd like to show you how to do is to build the flow that allows for renting of movies. And in order to do this, we would need a modal widget. So I'm just going to drop a modal widget right here. Let's call this modal create rental modal. Alright, we have the modal name, and I'm going to expand this a bit. Alright, so we have a nice looking modal right there. Alright, this looks good. For this modal, we need a couple of widgets. So I'm just going to bring them right here. We need a widget to display the movie title. So this is going to be movie. Alright, we would need an input for the title value. Alright, so we have the inputs right here. And I'm going to expand this. We'd also need one more for the customer email. So this is going to be customer. And for this, we would need a select widget. So I'm just going to place this right here and expand it. Alright, we'll come back to configure all of this. But for the select widget, I'm just going to call this create rental select. Alright, so let's go into bring in a widget to display the status. So this is going to be status. And similarly, we would need a select widget for this. And lastly, we want to display the rental date. So let's bring in one more for the rental date. And this is going to be rental date. All right. And for this, we will need a date picker. So let's bring in a date picker. And we have a nice form here. So let's set the title to rent movie. All right. And now we have a nice form right here. So what we want to do is to go back to the list and configure it such that when an item is clicked on, we actually store that movie item to the local store and then open up the modal so that we can configure the rental for that particular movie. So on the list item click, what I'm going to do is to write an if right here. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is to save the movie that was clicked into the store. So I'm going to use the store value function. So this is going to be store value. I'm going to set movie as the key and save the item, which will be current item. Alright, so we have this. The next thing I want to do is to open up that modal. So I can use show modal. Alright, let's scroll up a bit. Alright, show modal, and then pass in the name of the modal, which is the create rental modal. Alright, so selecting an item is going to store the item to the store and then open up the modal, as you can see. And we can go on to display the name of the movie that has been stored in the local store in the input widget right here. So for the default text, I can pull this from the store. So this is going to be appsmith.store.movie.title. And then we have the movie title showing up. Because this is not going to be edited, I can disable this field and we have that field disabled. The next thing we want to do is to enable search for the customer using the input we have here. So for the create rental select, what I need to do is to go in here and enable filtration. So clicking on this and going back to the select widget, you see that we have a filter now. We also need to enable server-side filtering, and that is going to make it possible for us to run an action whenever the filter is updated. So in order to configure the filter for this, we need to head back to MongoDB to create a search index that will be used in this filter. So for this, let's head back to MongoDB. We need to create a search index for the customer. And as I promised earlier, we're going to be using the visual editor. So I'm just going to select visual editor, click on next, set the index name to the default, and we need to go select the database and also the collection. This is going to be customers. All right, we need to click on next. And right here, we have dynamic mappings turned on. This is fine because for the customers collection, we have very few fields here. We have name, email, and address. So it's fine if we have dynamic mappings turned on. So I'm just going to click on create search index, and we're going to let MongoDB Atlas do its thing. So while the index is being created, we can head back to the application and actually create a query that would make use of that index. So I'm going to head back here to Atlas and create a new query. So let's call this query search customers. And we need to set the commands to aggregate and set the collection to customers. All right. For the pipeline, I'm just going to paste this in. And similarly for the query, we need to pull the value coming from the filter that is used in the create rental select. So this is going to be create rental select dot filter text. I'll have this looking good. So similarly, let's put a fallback here of an empty string, and this looks good. So I can click on the run button to test this, and we have no data coming in because we don't actually have an input. So let's go back here and configure this to be used here. So whenever the filter changes, what we want to do is to go and call the search customers query and make use of that data. So I'm just going to use this for example. So let's search for Tina. We actually have the query being executed but not displayed. So let's go into display the data coming in from that query. So this is going to be search customers the data. As you can see, we have some data coming in, and we can map over this to return an object that has a label and also a value. So for the label, we can pull this from the customer's email. And also for the value, we can set this to the customer's ID. All right, so taking a look at this, we have options that contain labels and values, and heading back to the search, you see that we have those options showing up. So we can select the customer, for example, Tina. We also need to specify the status. For the status, I'm just going to set this to some hard-coded options right now and set the default status to be rented. Because we know this is not going to change, I can set this to disabled because the initial status of a rented movie would be in the rented state. And we can also move on to configure the rental date. So for this date picker, I'm going to update the name of the date picker to create rental date picker. And for the default date, we have JavaScript enabled. And I can make use of the built-in moment library right here. So this is going to be moment.format. And we can set the format here. We want year, month, day, and we have the format right there. I also need to specify the date format, so let's set this to something that is really nice, and we can set the mean date as well. So I'm just going to set this, and this looks good. Lastly, let's create a query that allows us to save this rental to the database, and for that, I'm just going to head over to Atlas, and here where it says rental, I'm going to use the insert form, and this is going to automatically create a query for us. So I'm going to call this create rental, and we have every other thing pre-filled for us. We would not need to specify the ID because this is going to be taken care of by MongoDB. We have the customer field, and for this we can pull the customer's ID from the select, the create rental select. We also have the movie. For this, we can pull the movie ID from the store. We also have the rental date. For the rental date, we can pull this from the date picker, and for the status, we can hard code this to rental by default. So I have something configured and I'm just going to paste this in, and we have all of the data coming in, and we can see the evaluated value right here as well. So heading back to the modal, so I'm just going to open up this modal. Whenever the confirm button is clicked on, what we want to do is to call the create rental query. So let's go to the onClick action. When it's click on, we want to go to call create rental. And when that is successful, we want to do a couple of things. So let us enable JavaScript and pass in a function that is going to contain the actions we want to run next. So the first thing we want to do here is to close up this modal. So let's use close modal and close up the modal. So this is going to be create rental modal. All right. And when that's successful, we want to refresh the application by calling the get rentals query. So this is going to be get rentals.run. And we can show a message to say that this is successful. So let's show alert. And we're going to say rental created. All right. And set the alert type to success. All right. And this looks good. So we can go in to test this by clicking on the confirm button, and we have the rental created, and heading to the rentals tab, we have that records created for Tina. So we can see that this works, and since we have the application fully built, we can set a text title right here. So I'm just going to say movie search, set this to heading 1. And we have the application here. So I'm just going to also center align this, and this looks nice. All right. Since we have everything looking good here, I'm going to go ahead to deploy the application. And here we have the application fully built, ready to go, and powered by MongoDB Atlas Search. So this will be all for today's video. If you have any questions, please do ask them in the comment section, and I'll definitely answer your questions. All right. Till I see you in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye.